There are many animals strongly associated with specific regions or climates of the world, but sometimes animals are found in places we may not expect. Whether they naturally occur there, are rare vagrants, or have been introduced by people, in this video we're taking a look at animals found in places you may not expect. It was a sunny day in 1977. Harry Mitchell, a 21-year-old resident of Woodstock, Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada, decided it was the perfect day to go out hunting. Bird season was in full swing, so Mitchell grabbed his gun and headed out. As he came upon a brook, he saw something that he couldn't fathom. Two large birds with long necks wading through the water. Thinking he was seeing some sort of goose, Mitchell aimed his gun and shot one of the birds. The other immediately took off and disappeared out of sight. When Mitchell approached the bird to collect it, he was shocked by what he saw. This bird wasn't a goose at all, but a huge pink flamingo. There are 4 species of flamingo in the Americas, and the nearest flamingos to Newfoundland were in the southernmost parts of the U.S. state of Florida. So what were these birds doing here? Mitchell collected the flamingo, a female, and took it home to show his family. He snapped this picture of it next to his son, Shannon. In Woodstock, Mitchell became known as the man who had shot a flamingo, and the mystery of how the birds got to Newfoundland has proven impossible to solve. One theory is that the flamingo was part of a traveling zoo, and it escaped. But no reports of an escaped flamingo ever surfaced. The bird wasn't tagged, and it also wasn't alone. The other bird that flew away was most likely a male and its mate. Flamingos mate for life and travel together. The chances of a pair of flamingos escaping from a zoo and it never being reported seems quite unlikely. American flamingos are known to stray from their range on occasion. They're frequently spotted around the Gulf of Mexico, and less commonly up the east coast of the U.S. Perhaps the birds were already further up the coast during the summer months, and then got caught up in a storm and ended up all the way in eastern Canada. While we can't say for sure, this is the theory that's most commonly accepted. Today, the taxidermied flamingo is held in the collection at the Rooms in St. John's, where it is occasionally displayed alongside other oddities that are part of the strange history of the region. Around the time the flamingo was being shot in Canada, a private zoo was being established near Medellin, Colombia. Pablo Escobar was a drug lord who had amassed a huge amount of wealth. He decided that he would bring in animals from around the world to create a private menagerie on his hacienda. Among the exotic animals that were imported were 4 African hippos. They remained on the hacienda for the next 20 years, thriving in the warm tropical climate. Hippos are semi-aquatic herbivores, so they're tied to areas with plenty of water and sufficient grass for them to eat. In Colombia, they found both in abundance. In 1993, Pablo Escobar was killed, and his hacienda was abandoned. Many of the smaller, more docile animals were rounded up and placed in zoos, but the hippos were too dangerous, and no one really knew how to deal with them. As a result, they were left to wander the estate. It didn't take long for them to escape and make their way over to the nearby Magdalena River. Once free, the hippos began to breed, and by 2007, the population was up to 16 animals in the river. Local people didn't fear the hippos, but rather loved having them around. They became a local tourist attraction, and people began to profit off of the hippos in the river. But in 2009, recognizing that something needed to be done about the feral population, the government came in and shot an adult male that the locals had named Pepe. When images of Pepe began to circulate online, there was public outcry, and the government took a step back. By 2014, there were 40 hippos in the river, and they were expanding their range. In 2017, the government decided to try a different method. They captured a male and castrated him in order to slow the breeding process. Unfortunately, the procedure cost the government $50,000, making castration an unviable long-term solution. In 2019, the population had increased to as many as 120 animals spread across a 2,250 square kilometer area. So some studies were performed to determine the specific impact of the hippos. Some scientists had been arguing that the hippos were going to have a positive impact on the local environment, believing that they introduced beneficial nutrients to the water. But these beliefs were based on studies that had been performed in their native range in Africa. In Colombia, the study showed that the hippos were in fact damaging the environment. The water was being infected with cyanobacteria, causing an increase in algae blooms. And to make matters worse, the Magdalena River is home to several threatened and endangered species, including the West Indian manatee, Dall's tow-headed turtle, and the Magdalena River turtle. The hippos were likely having an unknown negative impact on all of these species. So the government began a program in 2021 to sterilize the hippos through vaccines. Again, the public rose up against the government. International animal rights groups filed a lawsuit against the Colombian government to stop them, but this time it didn't work. By 2023, there were over 200 hippos in the wild, and the government announced a 3-part plan to control the hippo population. At least 70 of the animals would be transferred to zoos in Mexico and India. 40 per year would be sterilized, and if necessary, some of the animals would be exterminated. While these measures are clearly not in the best interest of the hippos, the environmental concerns for other species in the Magdalena River were cited as justification for the government's actions. What do you think? Should the hippos be left alone, or is the government right for wanting to put an end to the feral hippo population? Carbrook Golf Course sits alongside the Logan River near Brisbane, Australia, only 14 kilometers from the Pacific Ocean. The 18-hole golf course is nestled in a V of the river, and right near the 14th hole, there's a huge lake that's separated from the river only by a thin slice of land on one side. In the 1990s, a series of floods meant that the river's level rose sufficiently to cause the lake and the river to merge into a single body of water on 3 separate occasions. This meant that the fauna of the river was able to cross into the lake, and by the end of the 1990s, there were rumors that something big was hiding there. Several people told staff that they had heard loud splashes in the lake, seen large, shadowy figures lurking under the surface of the water, and some even claimed to have seen a fin slip above the surface. Could the freshwater lake have become home to one or more sharks? Rumors of what became known as the Carbrook shark began to circulate. Sharks live in waters around the world, from tropical coral reefs to frozen Arctic waters, from the deepest parts of the ocean floor to the shallows of freshwater rivers. It's very uncommon for sharks to be able to tolerate fresh water, but of the over 500 known species in the world, 5 or 6 have been reported from bodies of fresh water, mostly from rivers. Bull sharks have the unique ability to maintain the necessary salt in their bodies to spend significant periods of time in fresh water. Most bull sharks only spend a few weeks before returning to the sea, but some experiments have shown that they could spend as much as 4 years in fresh water before dying. In Australia, bull sharks are known from many of the rivers, especially those closest to the ocean, including the Logan River. So, had some sharks managed to cross into the lake during the flooding in the 90s and managed to survive there? Staff at the golf course were skeptical. From 1996 until the early 2000s, the sharks in the lake at Hole 14 were nothing but a local legend, with only stories of some sightings circulating. Then, in the early 2000s, their presence was confirmed, and people began to feed the sharks at tournaments and special events at the golf course. The sharks were added to the club's logo, and they became a huge part of the appeal of the course. But photographic evidence of the sharks didn't become public until 2012. Scott Wagstaff had been working at the course for 2 years, but he had never actually seen the sharks himself, despite playing the course regularly. So one day, he got some meat, went down to the lake, readied his camera, and threw it in. Within a matter of minutes, he captured this image, and he took this footage. Amazingly, the lake was shown to be home to not just one, but at least 6 different bull sharks, all of which were between 1.8 and 3 meters in length. They had managed to survive in the lake at least since the last time the river had flooded in 1996, which was 16 years before Wagstaff captured the first images and videos of the sharks. The fact that the lake had managed to support that many sharks of that size for so long was baffling. Each shark would have needed to consume half a ton of fish annually to survive. But shortly after the video by Wagstaff went viral, the sharks disappeared. At least one was illegally fished out of the lake. Another turned up dead, floating on the surface. And then in 2013, the Logan River flooded again, and it's assumed that the remaining sharks likely traveled back into the river. The absence of these unique residents has been felt keenly at Carbrook Golf Course. While the sightings have stopped, some believe that maybe some juveniles made it into the lake during the last flood. So perhaps in the future, the large sharks will be back at the 14th hole. Parrots and parakeets are charismatic and intelligent birds. Their huge personalities have made them popular pets for centuries. Inevitably, as they've been taken around the world, they've also been released in places where they don't really belong. One would think that these generally tropical birds wouldn't do well in places far outside of their native ranges, but it seems that the opposite is true. As various species of parrot and parakeet have either been released or escaped from the pet trade, they have established thriving colonies in the most unnatural of environments: cities. Cities around the world have feral populations of parrots. But perhaps the strangest are the flocks of tropical green birds that can be seen flying through the wintry cities of the north. Many cities in Europe have feral populations of parrots and parakeets. Countries along the Mediterranean have the most diverse parrot life. Spain, for example, has at least 7 species of established feral parrot. Italy has had sightings of no less than 21 different species, with many known to have had breeding populations at one point or another. Despite the wide variety of species having been observed, the most common species in Europe is the rose-ringed parakeet from South Asia and Central Africa, and in North America, it's the monk parakeet from southern South America. These species have ranges that stretch far further north than most of the others. For example, rose-ringed parakeets are now abundant in and around London in the United Kingdom, and since the year 2000, they've managed to spread further and further north, now being found as far up as Edinburgh and Glasgow in Scotland. The Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany all have huge populations of rose-ringed parakeets, and those numbers continue to grow. In total, there are an estimated 100,000 feral rose-ringed parakeets living across Europe, and the species can be found in many other parts of the world, including Japan, New Zealand, South Africa, and the United States. In the US, most feral populations are concentrated in the South, especially Florida and California, but monk parakeets can be found as far north as New York, Boston, and Chicago, cities that can reach temperatures well below freezing through the winter months. Another interesting feral parrot species found in the United States is the blue and yellow macaw. This huge species is normally found in the jungles of Central America and the Amazon basin, but a population of about 20 has managed to sustain itself for over 30 years in Miami. Locals love seeing the birds as they fly around the city, feeding on ornamental plants. But more recently, people have begun to poach them to supply a growing demand for large parrots in the pet trade. Research has shown that some feral parrots negatively affect native hole-nesting birds as they compete for nesting space, and native bat species have also been shown to lose roosting space to the introduced parrots. But in many cities, the bright tropical birds are a welcome sight, and locals don't want to see them disappear. In October of 1985, a lobster fisherman was working off the coast of Dania Beach, Florida, when he came across a strange fish in one of his traps, a red lionfish. The reason this was strange is because lionfish are native to the Pacific and Indian Oceans, as well as the Red Sea. This wasn't just the first record of a lionfish in Florida or even in the United States, but it was the first record of a lionfish in the whole of the Atlantic Ocean. At the time, nothing was done about the discovery, and it was assumed to be a one-off, most likely someone's pet that had been released. But a few years later, disaster struck. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew passed through southern Florida, damaging an aquarium sitting right on the shore of Biscayne Bay. As a result of the damage, 6 lionfish escaped into the waters, and some believe that this was when the invasion began. By 2001, lionfish were being spotted all over the place, from as far north as Delaware on the northeast coast of the United States to Alabama in the Gulf of Mexico, to the island nation of Bermuda. By 2014, the species has spread across the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and parts of the North Atlantic. But was all of this thanks to just 6 fish escaping from an aquarium? While that is possible, it's likely that many more fish had found their way into the ocean through deliberate introductions. Lionfish are demanding pets, requiring a regular supply of live food to survive. They're also covered in venomous spines, which can cause extreme pain and even death in humans. It's likely that many fish over the years have been released into the ocean by pet owners who wanted to get rid of their pet fish. The theory was confirmed when a second species, the common lionfish, was also found to be breeding in the Caribbean in the early 1990s. Today, 93% of the lionfish found in the Atlantic are red lionfish, and the other 7% are common lionfish, and they're estimated to number as many as 1,000 per acre in some parts of their new range. The coral reefs of the Caribbean have seen an 80% reduction in diversity as a result of the introduced lionfish, which quickly consume large numbers of small fish wherever they're found. It's feared that the lionfish are now a permanent part of the ecosystem, with no hope of controlling their numbers. But this hasn't stopped conservation groups from working to eradicate as many populations of the lionfish as they can. Recreational divers are working to trap and destroy as many lionfish as possible from shallow reefs. While this does have a temporary benefit, the lionfish are quickly replaced as they've been shown to occupy much deeper waters than divers generally go. They're also able to breed monthly, so an annual cull of nearly 30% of the entire adult population would be necessary to see their numbers come into check. The repeated culling by divers has shown to cause a change in lionfish behavior as well. The fish are now more wary of divers and hide more during the day to avoid detection. Traps have also been developed that work to target the lionfish while avoiding trapping native species. These are being deployed at the depths that divers can't reach. Perhaps the most important campaigns against the lionfish have been to increase the commercial benefits of hunting them. In Belize, the Bahamas, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, lionfish spines are being used to produce jewelry for tourists, and restaurants from Florida to Brazil are being encouraged to serve lionfish as a cheap and eco-friendly alternative to other types of catch. The Roman Catholic Church in Colombia joined in on the initiative, encouraging Catholics in the country to eat lionfish on Fridays, during Lent, and for Easter, and the initiative has been very successful. Despite this, it seems that the lionfish are here to stay. Their introduction is considered one of the most serious threats to Caribbean coral reef ecosystems, and efforts to control their impact will need to continue indefinitely. Introduced pets are a huge problem in Florida. Most famously, there are as many as 300,000 Burmese pythons in the state, with almost no hope of ever being eradicated. Around the time that lionfish were being released on the coast, another unusual reptilian invasion was quietly unfolding in the state. Florida is known for its lush landscapes and diverse ecosystems, and in the 1990s, it became the unlikely home for several species of chameleon. The veiled chameleon, Austerlitz chameleon, and panther chameleon began to be released by pet owners, establishing feral populations in the southernmost part of the state. These chameleons, originally brought in through the exotic pet trade, found the state's warm, humid climate and abundant vegetation ideal for survival. These adaptable lizards, known for their striking color changes, quickly became a unique yet problematic addition to Florida's ecosystem. The veiled chameleon quickly became the most abundant chameleon in Florida, and its spread has been anything but accidental. Local reptile enthusiasts love knowing that chameleons were successfully breeding and surviving nearby. Chameleon farming became a popular hobby. People would find out where the chameleons lived, go out at night to spot them with flashlights, and then collect enough to take to a new location and establish their own colony of the lizards. And this hasn't just been happening in Florida. In Hawaii, a similar story has unfolded. Jackson's chameleon, a species native to East Africa, was introduced to the islands in the 1970s. Here too, they were most likely deliberately released by pet owners, and they quickly established populations on the Big Island, Oahu, Maui, and Kauai. Jackson's chameleons, with their distinctive three-horned appearance, adapted well to Hawaii's diverse environments, from forests to agricultural areas, and their spread was facilitated by the island's favorable climate and the lack of natural predators. Chameleons are voracious hunters, preying on insects, small birds, and even other reptiles. Their presence has disrupted the natural balance of the ecosystems they've been introduced to, outcompeting native species and negatively affecting native insect populations. Conservationists and local authorities have been working to manage these populations, but the elusive nature of chameleons makes them difficult to track and control. In Hawaii in particular, chameleons pose a significant threat to the island chain's already extremely threatened native species. Efforts to control feral chameleon populations in both Florida and Hawaii include public awareness campaigns, capture and removal programs, and research into their ecological impacts. However, these efforts face challenges due to the chameleon's secretive nature, wide distribution, and members of the public who deliberately and actively work against eradication campaigns. And that's it for today's video. What other species have you heard of that are found in strange places? Let me know in the comments below. I need to again say a special thanks to my patrons. It's through their support that I'm able to continue to produce a video like this every week. If you want to support the channel, join us on Patreon. The link is in the video description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.